Welcome back to the Data Science Hangout, everybody. If we have not met yet, I'm Libby. Hello, I'm a data science community manager here at Posit. I'm also a data science educator with experience teaching both Python and R, and I am in San Antonio, Texas. If you don't happen to be familiar with Posit, Posit builds enterprise solutions and open source tools for people who do data science with R and Python. We are also the company formerly known as RStudio. So if you know RStudio, you know Posit. I am joined by the creator of the Hangout and my co-host today, who is behind the scenes in the chat. Rachel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you today. I'm Rachel. I lead customer marketing at Posit. And as Libby said, I'll be behind the scenes here in the chat, but helping to gather the questions as well. But thanks for joining us.
Yeah, the Hangout is our open space to hear what's going on in the world of data across different industries. We get to chat about data science leadership and connect with other people who are facing similar things to us. We get together every Thursday, same time, same place. So please, please, please come and join us live if you are watching on YouTube. And if you are, there's information in the description for you to join and put it on your calendar. So I want to thank everybody. You have all made this the wonderful, welcoming, friendly space that it is today, and we're very committed to keeping it that way. So if you have any feedback about your experience, there's going to be a Zoom survey. It's going to pop up in your browser after you leave this meeting. I think even if you leave halfway, it'll pop up. Please fill that out. Let us know how we're doing. We would love to hear from you, but you can also always find us on LinkedIn or Blue Sky. I think that we are the only Rachel Dempsey and Libby Heron on Blue Sky and LinkedIn, so we're pretty easy to find. At the Hangout, we love hearing from you. It doesn't matter what your years of experience are, what your title is, what your industry is, what languages you do or do not use. We really encourage you to hang out in the chat together, introduce yourself, say hello to everybody. What's your role? Where are you based? What do you like to do for fun? I feel like we always really connect in the chat over things that we do for fun. I think a couple of weeks ago, there was a fantastic running thread that was going on with some really amazing advice on like distance running. So yes, get together. And then also, if you have a role that you're hiring for, please share that. If there's a role on your team or that you're aware of, or if you are looking for a role, please be very vocal about that. Let's see if we can connect people in our community with roles. All right, this is usually where I say, there are 3 ways to ask questions, but we're going to try something different to see if we can streamline questions today. We are going to ask questions in Slido only, and let's just try this, right? So there's going to be a Slido link in the chat. I'm going to try to make sure that we share this several times because we know that people come in and out of the chat or come in and out. So in Slido, if you are not familiar with it, it is anonymous, but you can put your name there. So put your name next to your question. And then there's also the ability to upvote questions. So take a look at Slido, see if there's a question that somebody else has asked that you really like. You can maybe like move it to the top of our queue for consideration. And of course, if you want to be anonymous still, absolutely, that's fine. And if today you don't have a mic going, I think it should work if you just put an asterisk next to your name in Slido or somewhere before or after your name. That way, if you have a question that you can't ask live, I can't pull you in, we can still read it for you, okay? All right, let's see how this goes today. I am so excited to be joined by our co-host, our featured leader today, Blake Abbenante, Director of Analytics and Data Science at Suffolk Construction. Blake, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you, what you do, and what you do outside of work for fun.
Sure. Thank you. I'm excited to be here and talk to everybody. So, as Libby mentioned, my name is Blake Abbenante. I am Director of data analytics and data science at Suffolk Construction. DADS for short, or at least that's what I kind of try to get going, but it has not been widely adopted yet as an acronym. I've been here about 2 years. And we are kind of like so Suffolk Construction is a general contractor, which means we do, primarily construction management. And we are kind of a central analytics and data science function. So we support the entire org. There's about 3,000 employees. The vast majority are kind of in the field on construction sites. So most of our, support is for kind of the corporate entities. So, all the kind of common ones you would have at other organizations, HR, people and culture, we call it here, finance, et cetera, and then operations, which are people in the field supporting them. So I lead the team responsible for analytics, which mostly in this context means kind of like cross-functional strategic analysis, and then data science, which is, what you would imagine data science to be, like building products with data and to be optimized in terms of how we perform construction duties.
Awesome. And for fun outside of work?
Yeah, sure. So for fun, I probably comment to like what most people say. I have two kids, a 9-year-old and 4-year-old. So that is a lot of time spent with them. Primarily, we live in Boston, but we tend to be like more of a summer family. So sort of hibernation mode now, and in the summer, spend most of our times at the beach. I'm trying to, I am surfed a lot more when I was younger. Trying to get back into it. Started last summer with my daughter, and my dream is to like get my daughter and my son all surfing together at some point in the future. So that is what we do in the summer. In the winter, I am kind of a big Celtics fan. I've been a season ticket holder since '06, I think. So spent a lot of time back and forth with Celtics games and going to the Boston Garden.
Awesome. I've never surfed. I think that I'd be terrible at it, but it sounds like a lot of fun.
Well, it's like I used to like snowboard, and like the falling on the surfboard is generally better than the falling on a snowboard. So
I bet. Yeah, unless you have like really, really nice powder, I guess. I've never snowboarded either, but my husband is a snowboarder. Um, well, I was wondering if you could give us a good example of sort of the type of problem that your team works on. You don't have to be super specific if you don't want to or you can't be, but I think it would be helpful to understand the types of problems that you work on and also the type of data that you have access to use. That way we can sort of form some context around this because we come from all different industries and we won't all know
yeah, for
exactly
sure.
what you do.
So yeah, we support, like I said, some of it would be things you'd see everywhere. So, supporting HR, we do a lot of churn and attrition analysis, forecasting for hiring. Some of the construction specific type stuff that we focus on then is safety is paramount. So predictive models to understand relative safety on projects. When do we think projects will be at a higher risk based on previous factors about just the building itself, but the work that has led up to that point in time. And then a lot of stuff around resources procurement, like how do we plan for projects effectively? Because if you think about especially for the GC part of the business, there's a lot of stuff that goes in planning. And then once a shovel goes in the ground, you're kind of set. Like so, you kind of plan accordingly. You make a pitch to an owner about what you're going to build for. So like as opposed to like usually when you do construction at your house where it's time and material. So if a contractor goes on forever, you kind of pay for it. That is not how commercial construction generally works. You kind of have a guaranteed maximum price, and that's what the owner is going to pay. So you want to make sure you plan accordingly and get a price that an owner will agree with, but also leaves you as much potential profit as possible. So a lot of support on the planning before a construction project starts, and then understanding the timeline and how we think we're trending towards not eating away at that potential profit line once a shovel goes in the ground.
Okay. I was thinking when you said, I feel like you said safety in there, and I was like,
Yep.
safety, like physical safety, like construction safety.
Yeah.
Are there two aspects to this, like risk safety and also physical safety?
Yeah. So when we say safety, we generally mean like on-site safety. So like,
Okay.
is there going to be an incident? But then there is safety, like, just insurance as well, which we generally think of more of it insurance, but I guess the insurance and risk, but there is like a safety, I guess, uh, a safety aspect to that as well.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I feel like construction is probably one of the only places where analytics or data science would really go into physical human safety
Yeah.
in any way. I can't think of a lot of other industries besides maybe emergency services, right? Emergency responders that would be in that zone. That's really interesting. Um, I also am kind of wondering, I feel like I've heard you say that the construction industry is just sort of, you feel like it's behind in analytics in general.
Yeah, I
Why
mean,
do you think that is?
even more broadly than analytics, like if you, I mean, there's been multiple studies done by like McKinsey and other places that, a lot of the optimization and efficiencies that have been gained as computers have like worked their way into other industries have not been realized in the construction industry. So, I think the typical construction project runs 20% late and 80% over budget.
Wow.
And yeah, so it's due to a lot of factors. Like if you look at the average, I think one of the common ones people also always refer to is like Empire State Building was built in a year and 30 days or something. And, you know, building that size project today would at best you probably finish in maybe 5 years. So, there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, well, one of it is safety. Like there was, fatalities in the Empire State Building and people are much more cognizant of safety. But I think generally the industry has been slow to adopt even like standard stuff. Like there's a lot of smaller, construction firms that using tables in Excel is almost like a bridge too far, or like is like the edge of like how they interact with data. So that's why, some of the larger ones are definitely making forays into it. And then there is like some, construction tech, so like cool automation stuff, but like the actual management of a project and, just how you think about consuming data and using data to make decisions has been very, very lacking. And I think some of it is just the logistics, like, right, like people on site, like the last thing they want to do is pull up a laptop and, and start looking at data that way. So, but also I think just the tool, like there's a lot of antiquated, digital tools and they don't kind of easily talk together either.
Right. Jared in the in the comments just said, my dad works in construction and still gets me to help with his Excel tables. I think if you're a data person, you have either you're the person in everyone's life that helps them with Excel tables.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of tech, what does your tech stack look like? Like, what did it look like when you came on board at Suffolk? And have you sort of influenced it to change it to try to
Yeah.
like modernize it and bring more
Yes.
in?
I mean, I will say, again, like relatively speaking, I was when I came to Suffolk, and talking and interviewing here, I was surprised. Like, I saw the job posting. I think I saw it one or two times, and I was like, I don't know, it doesn't seem like I'm not so sure. And then I applied and I interviewed, and at the time I interviewed, my boss at that time was so she's chief data officer, Chiki Chen. So I was already surprised that they had like someone at the executive level with data in their title. So and then talking to her, they even had like a data engineering team, like a 5 to 6 person data engineering team, which was surprised. Like it's bigger than other data engineering teams places I've been that were supposedly data and digital focused. So they had invested quite heavily in resources. Most of the data to that point, or how it had manifested itself, was data engineering for consuming data across all these disparate systems, and mostly like data visualization. So we had like a Tableau development team. So when I came in terms of like data science, like most of the work that we had done it had grown very organically, and there was no like enterprise grade kind of infrastructure to build it. Like we had, one of our workflows was someone had like uploaded a Excel sheet to like SharePoint. Data engineering ingested into SharePoint and pushed it down to Redshift, and they ran an Alteryx flow that then on a desktop that wrote it back to like another Excel file that was then ingested into like another data platform. And so it was good work that was doing. There was just like everything was different and kind of very non-transparent. So when I came aboard, that's where I was, so we run Databricks as a backend, and we had just started to stand up Databricks as a data warehouse, but the rest of our kind of outward facing tools were lagging. So being a fan of Posit, it seemed like a good synergy for, having a platform that would allow us to make our analysis mostly focused to start with like our analysis efforts more transparent and reproducible. So we started with Workbench, quickly moved to incorporating Connect as well. So we could, the work that we did in Workbench, we could publish and have kind of like a repeatable workflow. So we've stood that, so from a tech stack, we have Databricks. On the data science side, we do most of our stuff in Workbench and Connect. We also, obviously, I mentioned we do Tableau. For kind of standard dashboard visualizations. We also are just like Microsoft is very big in the construction industry, so we're kind of like outside of the data team, we're kind of a Microsoft shop, so there's like some Power BI dashboards floating around as well. And then we've kind of delineated the line that's like anything that's like not static, we build either like, we build Shiny or Streamlit apps that through Posit and deploy through Posit Connect. And we're starting to move towards introducing a semantic layer. So we're like rolling out Cube. So we kind of have a standard interface for our metrics across the organization, because that's been another one of the challenges, like yeah, even not unique to us, where maybe the metric that you see on Power BI that's supposed to be the same on Tableau is slightly different. So you spend the first 20 minutes of a 30-minute meeting under like trying to figure out what the nuance in that is. So we're trying to move all of that kind of logic as far back upstream as possible, and kind of build out a more formal structure of a data model in Databricks, and then use Cube to be like the interface for really all consumption layers.
Awesome. There's a question that came in anonymously on Slido that really ties into this. So I figured I would take an opportunity to ask it now, which is, how do you decide what to use Posit for? I'm guessing like Posit products, Workbench, Connect, stuff like that, and when to use those BI tools that you have access to.
Yeah. So I mean, I will say like what I wish would happen, and then like what actually probably happens.
Okay.
Which is probably like my hottest data take, which is I mean it's like two-sided. One is that like most orgs move like way too quickly to dashboards, because people say they want to get involved in data, and like the most tangible way that you think about data is a dashboard. So you end up building a lot of dashboards that once people start using them, um, they the value is maybe not there. So I always prefer to like do more kind of bespoke analysis, and then when you get to the point of understanding what is really important to the business, like that is what you codify and put into a dashboard. So you have like fewer dashboards, but they're more meaningful because they kind of measure the things that are more important to the business. So that is how like I would draw the line. I mean, I feel like you need to meet people. You need to meet your business stakeholders like where they are, like just all of a sudden standing up a bunch of dashboards, uh if especially if they have like no context, data. I mean, construction, Suffolk in particular being a really good example, that people went from like no dashboards to all of a sudden 3 dozen Tableau dashboards, and then just trying to navigate their way through that is not super helpful. So, sometimes things that are in a dashboard, if there is no need to filter and the data is not that dynamic, maybe you just do like exception reportings that you send through email. So like we're trying to move that kind of stuff to Posit, right? Like, does it need to be a dashboard? Do you need to interact with it? Or is it just, I want to get a notification when this thing changes below a certain threshold? And like, so we look to like move and automate that stuff through, Porto and emails and scheduling through Connect. So that is one aspect. And then kind of like more broadly, our guidelines are like, if it's just tabular static data that people want to pivot and filter, like that would be a BI dashboard. But if it's something that like you need more interactive calculations, or any kind of interacting with a model or other API, we usually look to build something custom through, then deploy through Connect.
Awesome. Yeah, lots more flexibility when you can do it that way for sure. Well, I have some amazing Slido questions that are getting upvoted. Zach asked a great question. It's got asterisks next to it, so I'm going to ask it for him. And it says the Empire State Building didn't have a lot of precedent for it. That's very true, and I hadn't thought about that. Does the construction industry have issues with a lack of historical data for new projects that are really ambitious like that, I'm guessing?
Yeah. So I mean, even like, the Empire State Building itself, like even given that, there's the construction project itself, like how complex is the building, but then as more buildings get built, like even just where you're working becomes, the challenges of that are compounded as well. So I forget what someone I was talking to someone here, one of our estimators, and I forget, I don't want to say what the number is exactly, but building in Boston, about like 40% of the budget or is just moving materials around or getting it in or off site, because the access is so limited. So uh there's no data for that, like to account for that. But like even to your basic question, yeah, there's definitely a lot of challenge with historical data. we generally think we're pretty good about data relative to the rest of the construction industry, and we do have a lot of it. But some of the tools, especially if you think about scheduled data, they use it's a tool that's now owned by Oracle. Primavera P6 is um, like go-to, and that is, it's owned by Oracle, like most Oracle stuff. It doesn't seem like it's been touched in 25 or 30 years. So there's not a lot of great ways to get data out. It's kind of very messy, and then how people set up their projects are always different. So like looking for like a through line between a project that was stood up 25 years ago and how a project is built today, there's not a lot of continuity in that data.
Yeah, I guess that's the same problem that everybody has, is
Yeah.
that uh, historical trends don't always equal future projections, right? And once we got past COVID, I think we all realized that that was true in a really big way,
Yeah.
that nothing would ever be the same again. And I feel like COVID, um, well, and also just supply chain things that were happening during that time really changed construction with construction material costs. Is that something that you had to deal with, or the aftermath of that when you came on? Because you came onto Suffolk in 2023, right?
Yeah, so we're like, so it's, right on the heels of COVID, basically.
Hmm.
But all the projects that took place then, I mean, some of them, I mean, we actually have done a good job. Like they actually went back and coded a lot of the stuff, because there's even just some costs that were like additional costs that were associated with projects or additional PPE that they needed during the COVID time that, all else being equal would even then skew the data about how that project performed relative to the before time. So we've done
Right.
a good job of like trying to identify some of that and excluding it, but even just more broadly, like, yeah, like the second or third order effects are, you know, not as explicit and much harder to identify. I will say like the procurement and supply chain, I mean, it obviously affects us. Suffolk as a GC, generally speaking, is somewhat shielded from those costs, like they're on the owner or on the subcontractor, but it does affect like the overall schedule. So it's not something that we can completely ignore. But yeah, like that is always a constant. All right, people want to look at historical data. Like, do you just put a big asterisk for the 3 years that we were doing, COVID related projects and carve them out, or like just make note of like how
Yeah.
they change it? And we don't have like a hard and fast rule for how we do it. It really, I hate to be like, you kind of look at it and make a judgment, but that ultimately is because like, I mean, that's the other thing too. Like, construction, we're rather large, but if you think about the unit of measure being a project itself, and at the scale that we usually do most of our analysis, there's, maybe only 30 or 40, maybe upward of 60, projects that finish in a given year, right? The life cycle of a project
Right.
being like 3 years, that, at that level, it's kind of small sample sizes all over the place.
Oh, wow, that's such a long time horizon, because inflation changes a ton even
Yeah.
over 3 years. All right, well, enough of my nosy inflation questions. There's a lot of really good questions on Slido. Reminder for everybody, if you've just hopped on, we're asking questions in Slido today, which is actually pretty cool because you get to upvote stuff, and I'm loving seeing what kind of rises to the top. So we have an anonymous question that has risen to the top of our Slido. And it says, do you get pushback from site managers who place more trust in their subjective experience than what the data is telling you? And if so, how do you get buy-in from those people?
Uh, yes, 100%. And I wouldn't even say like I don't even know if I frame it as pushback. A lot of it is just like they know better, right? Like uh there's nuance in the actual management of a project that is not captured in the data that we have available. So generally what we want to do before we roll anything out is kind of, identify site managers, superintendents, PXs, people who have more intimate knowledge of projects themselves, to get their insight and feedback on what we're doing before we go roll something out. And I will say, I hope we've done a better job since I've started, but that is, I think, been, again, probably not specific to Suffolk, but one of our big challenges here is that we've done a lot of good technical work, like the 80% of getting the technical work done, and then we've really dropped the ball on the last 20% work, which is like, what's the productization of this? Like, how do you get it to end users in a way that it makes sense to them? Some of it is as simple as like how you label it. Like when we rolled out, like, the example I gave before where we called it like the safety model, it somehow morphed into like and the way the data was presented, like it was kind of like you have a higher likelihood of incident. So the initial rollout turned from something being, helpful or useful to like a list you wanted to avoid, and that actually would impact how people collected data, um, and tuned out the results just by the way that we framed up what the solution was. So, a lot of lessons that we've learned there, which is the technology itself, whether the model building itself is maybe at most like 50% of the problem. The rest of it is like how do you roll it out and make it something that communicate with your end users so they understand what you're doing, and how it can best make them more efficient at their job. It's not something that we're trying to use data to be big brother and flag people for things that are beyond their control. So yeah, so I mean that is like a constant evolution so like that is broadly speaking is like we do try to do a better job of partnering with our strategic business stakeholders so they can be part of like how we roll solutions out. But the other one is just, I mean, we're kind of going eyes wide open, knowing that the data that we currently have, there's probably additional data that we would need that would give us more nuanced insights, and then partnering with like these people who are on the job sites to figure out how we can actually collect that level of detail that we need. So when we iterate on these, whatever the data product is again, that we think we're improving because we've now captured additional fidelity in the data.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I have another fantastic question from Slido that has been upvoted a ton. It's from Tony. Tony, are you available to jump in and ask? Let's see. Maybe I caught Tony off guard.
I see Tony tried to unmute,
Oh,
but oh, there you are.
Aha.
oh, there we are. Okay.
Hey, Tony.
My video wasn't coming on. Yeah, I just like to hear a little bit about where you might be using AI in the process of budgeting or forecasting, or trying to figure out maybe where cost overruns are likely to happen, or where you can build in to your budget to try to ensure you'll have some profit margin in the long run, or even, especially here in the Boston area, the types of customers that are more profitable, higher ed versus healthcare versus government, things like that, and which AI tools or products you're using.
Yeah, sure. Great question. So, I would say, so Suffolk, one of the maybe benefits of Suffolk is we are still private. So John Fish, is uh founded Suffolk and still leads it. And he is a big proponent of data. And this past year, like, has made kind of a corporate wide edict. I mean, I look at the sign across the street that says we're aiming to be the future leader of AI in the built world. So like it's kind of like a company wide initiative to figure out how we can best leverage AI. Um, so the way that over the past year it's kind of taken shape, there are sort of two flavors of it. One is kind of what you would imagine, what everyone's doing, which is, all right, we have a bunch of SOPs or PDF somewhere. So like, let's throw like those in one that we can build a bunch of chat agents that are, does RAG to retrieve specific information about particular domains. That one's less exciting. But the other areas that we're looking to do it, I mean, there's kind of two large ones, and it's actually in not necessarily either of the ones that you identified, but we're doing in the design, like how can we use AI to augment and speed along design of buildings themselves, and then in the planning of projects. So could we, as I mentioned before, like the kind of planning tool that is the industry-wide standard P6 Primavera is very antiquated. And so just from a user experience perspective, it's not very intuitive or friendly. And where we think we can like gain a lot of efficiencies is automating using AI to kind of, if not create an entire schedule, take something that it may take a planner 2 weeks now and get them 80% of the way there in a manner of minutes or hours even. So those are kind of some of the big areas of focus, and then kind of maybe in between area where we've seen a lot of traction is in data transformation. So like we have a lot of data in PDF. So can we, as part of our data pipeline, can we use AI to like extract information out of that and turn it into tabular formats as part of our data warehouse? So we've picked up a lot of stuff like that. So I honestly, like, in the past 2 or 3 months, like, I feel like, a year ago, everyone was really trying to force AI and like put it in, as a square peg in a bunch of round holes. And I think over the past month, like, we've had like a bunch of really um smart and novel use cases come up. Like, literally, I think just this past week, one of my colleagues built he has an AI bot that, or an AI agent that looks at GitHub submissions. So basically, like, looks for any changes to our data model and then goes and uh, looks through all our GitHub repos and like figures out any references to it and like find out the products that are associated with it, so we can send notifications to say, this change to this data model is going to have a potential impact to these products downstream. So yeah, so I think, I think probably still in the short term, aside from like those two outward facing ones, a lot of the efficiencies that we're gaining are more upstream in the data pipeline side at the moment. And then in terms of what we use, so as I mentioned, like, from an enterprise agreement, we kind of have a partnership with Microsoft. So we started using, the Microsoft Azure suite of OpenAI integration.
Mhm.
Since then, we've been given the ability to kind of pilot other ones as well. So Databricks has their own native LLM, so we use that somewhat. We're kind of looking, or maybe potentially piloting. So we have a bunch of people using individual OpenAI like business accounts, but so looking to consolidate that potentially as enterprise as well, and try that. And then maybe again, some individuals have used Gemini as well, and we might look to make that more formal as well. So really, like, trying to run the gamut, whatever's out there. Like, it's kind of like the Wild West still in terms of technology, like trying to figure out which one works best for which scenario.
I think we can all relate to that. Thank you for the amazing question,
Great,
Tony.
thanks.
I have a question, and I think that Jeffrey Silverman's question on Slido kind of rolls in with mine. So Jeffrey had asked, like, you know, the construction industry is hesitant to implement new tech in data science and analytics. So do you find that folks at the company are resistant to your work? And I know that we had talked a little bit about like getting people to trust you. My question is, how important is it to have an executive like you've got that's championing data science efforts? And is there any advice that you have for people who are sort of in that battle right now where they're trying to get executive champions on board?
Yeah, so I will say, I mean, that is probably
Tough question,
the
judging
biggest
by
lesson I've learned over
your
my
eyes
career.
just
And
got
like,
big.
well, I was like, I mean, my somewhat not snarky answer is like, the best way to do it is to, when you're looking for a job, find a place that already has that infrastructure built in. Because I will say that has been like my biggest challenge in my career. Like, you talk to somebody who's really all about data, like they're the hiring manager, and then you get hired in, and maybe they're like a senior manager or director, depending what, like that's as high as it goes. And then, they could have buy-in, but that doesn't mean that they have buy-in from whomever is above them. So whenever I would interview, I would always ask, like, what's the highest role that had, like, of somebody who has data in their title? And like, that would kind of, to me, be a proxy for like how bought in are you on actually using data. But otherwise, you kind of go down the same path that you normally always do, which is that, like, all right, you find your strategic business partner, you like get your small wins, and then you fight for a budget. But I wish I had a better answer, but like, to me, like, um there is no shortcut to it if you don't have people who, I mean, I've been places where you can take individual data wins to like people at the sea level or even right below sea level, but unless it's like a company-wide like edict, like, I find it really challenging for everyone to just, for it always to be like top of mind, and not something that will get cut as soon as, those are the type of decisions that need to be made. So I wish I had a more optimistic answer for it, but like, I think, they're obviously, like, you kind of have to understand the scope of the battle that you're trying to fight. And if it is that, like, I'm a manager who've come in and like I only have a director above me, then who believes in my vision, but like, you know, then thinking you're going to be able to get a a budget that to implement something, you know, enterprise wide out of the gate is kind of, that's more like a 3 or 4 or 5 year play even. So you kind of have to understand
Right.
like how high up you have approval on, and then like kind of fight your battles and work your plan from there. Because I don't think there is a shortcut to go from we only have buy-in at the like manager level all the way up to like C-suite buy-in.
Yeah, that's not something that's going to turn around in a couple of months or even maybe a couple of
Yeah.
years. All right. Thank you so much for those insights. And fantastic question from Jeffrey. I have an anonymous question that is next in our sort of vote on Slido reminder. We're doing questions in Slido and you could vote on them, which is super fun watching them sort of like pop around my screen. So the question is, are there established practices for sharing data across businesses in construction? Or do you only have to rely on your own company's data only?
Yeah. So there are no established practices. I mean, I would say even not even across businesses, even within businesses, there's very little established practice for sharing data. So unfortunately, there's not. I mean, there are tools that, construction management tools that allow, multiple different people to kind of access from a operational perspective the same data. Like Procore is a big one, and you can have like a GC like us and subcontractors like having, or even owners having access to that same instance. But in terms of just like raw data, there's not, and like that, like I said, even like there's a lot of places, especially when you get down to like the subcontractor level, where it's all data in Excel, and then there's not even going to be a standard format as to what that Excel is. So I don't think any of them are on the call, but we have like a great data engineering team here that thankfully, because I've been in places where you've had to do it, like that's been a lot of the work that has been thrust upon data scientists as well, to like, all right, like how do I standardize all these different data sources into it? So you spend 50 to 60% of your time just doing that. Our data engineering team is great, and they handle a lot of that for us. So whether it's data that they ingest from Excel through SharePoint and matching it up to um, you know enterprise data that we have, like that, thankfully, like we partner very closely with them, but they do all of that work. So we are one of the few, I think, fortunate, lucky ones. Like our data science team, like we just start at the data science part and don't have to do very little data engineering. But
Awesome.
yeah, you
That's
you
rare.
do you do raise a good point, which is that, like, as people think about implementing AI and LLM, like as I mentioned, like if you're a large scale construction company and you're only doing, say 30 to 40 projects a year, there is like a real understanding that there's like a lack of enough data, but there is not like an aggregate data broker that like has, there's maybe a handful that have enough data construction wide to like make this kind of inferences. So it is a real challenge to think about, do you have enough data even across from your own business to do anything like at scale?
Yeah. I mean, these are questions that I think we all sort of bump up against, depending on where we are and what industry we're in. Well, I have so many questions on Slido that are so good. Let's see how many we can get through in the 20 minutes that we've got left. Neil Bray had a great question. It's got asterisks next to it, so I'm going to ask it. Your bio says that you have integrated AI into business processes. So for coders who are currently working outside of AI, what would you suggest as their first step into AI?
So I'll say, and not this is like a non-paid endorsement. My first foray into like using AI was using LangChain, and like that was just kind of a disaster for me. Like I could like didn't really click. And then recently, like we've done some kind of other integrations, and then over the past couple of months, using the Elmer package through Posit, and also like the chat list one as well. We've started both using. I think like makes coding to AI like much more approachable. So I would like, if you have not used like the Posit suite of AI integrations, I think like that makes it all very approachable. That would be how I would recommend it getting started, and it is really easy then to integrate it to like any other kind of work that you've done, or if you do happen to be, Posit or any of the Posit suite of tools. So building it into a Shiny app or whatever else. I think that is probably the easiest way to get started or get your toes wet.
Yeah, I see Rachel putting in the chat links to Chatlist and Elmer as well, if anybody wanted to go check out. There are so many amazing packages that I feel like have just come out in the past 6 months or a year that have been worked on that really make interfacing with LLMs so much easier and more intuitive. Mall is also a great one,
Yep.
MALL, the Mall package. Really, really like that one. So go check that one out. Maybe somebody can put a link in the chat to that one. There we go. Thanks, Link. Link with the link. I love that. All right. So next question from Slido. Let's see how many we can get in. Alan, you had a question. And I'm guessing this is our Alan Schiffman. If you want to unmute and ask.
It is your Alan.
It is.
Hey, Blake, this is a really great conversation. Thank you. I'm really curious from a kind of operational perspective how support works for the set of POSIT tools you use alongside that big enterprisey stack of Azure, Databricks, Power BI. How do you carve out support there? Is that dedicated support or is it kind of shared? Does it come from members of your team? With specialized tools like that, I think it's often hard to figure out who owns those things, who makes them work in the environment, all that kind of stuff. Would love to hear how that works in your organization.
Yeah, that's a great question. And you like kind of hit on I don't call it a sore spot, but like we kind of almost do run two parallel environments. We have like the Microsoft environment, which is fully supported by IT. And then we have a separate AWS environment, which is where Databricks and all our POSIT tools run. It split that way prior to me being part of Suffolk. We've been kind of had some inroads over the past 6 months or so about like can we bring them back a little together? It doesn't necessarily make sense for us to be so separate, especially now in the world of AI, where we want to like integrate some of the AI agents that we're building on this AWS side, like into as a co-pilot. So for the Azure and all the Microsoft side, we do have support from IT. On the AWS side, we're kind of be careful what you wish for. We're a little on our own, but we have to support our own. We do have some outside contracted support, like MLOps or excuse me, DevOps help. But generally, like I kind of administer all of our POSIT tool suite at the moment. But it is my hope that over the next year that we can have more support from our IT team. I think maybe part of the biggest challenge now is like they are, they are much more fluent in the Microsoft side of the world. So as we start to bring on more AWS people, like I think we have a better chance of getting more internal support.
Awesome.
Cool.
Fantastic question, Alan. Thank you. I wanted to say that there are a couple of questions in Slido that could be answered by the chat, by our community. So please hop in and answer this for these anonymous askers. One is, can someone explain the difference between data science and data engineering? Great question. Another one is, what is a tech stack or a data stack? Because I asked that in the beginning. I asked Blake, like, what his tech stack was. So chat, get to answering that for our beautiful anonymous askers. And our next question is from Devin. Devin, are you available to unmute and ask this one? Put you on the spot here. There we go.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all right.
Yeah, so not quite in construction, but I work in HVAC with building automation. We actually partner with a company that offers an analytics platform to do fault detection and diagnostics. Our experience is that clients are really excited about it. I think especially getting transparency and insight where you might not have had that before, but nobody else really wants to adopt. It's too much of a challenge, and getting the infrastructure and the cost is always, kind of a preventative thing. So I'm curious, what your experience has been with that.
Adoption from clients in particular, or just like out from external folks?
I guess really throughout the industry. I mean, we see different levels of adoption at different roles over the place.
I mean, I think yes. So there's some of like the larger owners, I think from an owner perspective, are more sophisticated and like expect even pretty transparent and detailed access to data. So again, probably not surprisingly, like those are the ones who have probably more automated tools that allow for the consumption to be easier. Further down, I mean, there it is a little bit more of a challenge. I think where you do kind of get buy-in is that like if you can draw the string between better data collection gives us better insights, which can ultimately like lead to like lower insurance rates or other cost savings along the lines that could like, all right, because ultimately that's what people are like, that's going to be the bottom line, is like how is this going to save me money. So kind of being able to draw that line between like, all right, like, the better you can tell us how long people are on site, like that is a direct impact on, ultimately downline safety metrics. I think the more that you can get buy-in from, all whoever it is. I will still say like that's kind of like looking up. The kind of bigger challenge is maybe down like subcontractors again, like that they even like those are like, we work on small margins and they work on even smaller margins. So being like you also have to collect data for us is going to be like that very bottom of the line. Some of it just becomes like contractual, like as we bring on a sub, like they kind of have they have to make concessions as to like what they'll provide for you. But I mean, I think the more that we can integrate the technology into the tool set that people are actually using on site versus it being like a 1+ thing that they have to do, or even like for latent data collection is what I'm always pushing. Where it's not, people don't have to like explicitly do things, but if we can just like track stuff around, on construction sites, whether it's through like AI or just like monitors, I think we can lower the load that we need from a adoption standpoint on the data generation side, at least.
Awesome. Thanks so much for asking that question, Devin. I have an anonymous question that has risen to the top on Slido. Reminder that you can vote on Slido, so please go check out those questions and vote for them. And it is, if you were sharing with other construction companies who aren't really using data as much today, how has the data science made an impact? So what impact has data science made at Suffolk?
Yeah, so I think if you think about like, if you think of the inverse, which is just generally in the construction industry, like a lot of the people are, it's an older demographic in general, right? Like a lot, like, so there's a lack of resources and it becomes but a lot of kind of like what you would use data for right now is done just by kind of like tribal knowledge. Like, I have a superintendent who's been on site for 35 years and he knows like every kind of project. Those people, like in the next 5 to 10 years, are all going to age out of the construction workforce, and then you're going to be left with like this dearth of not having that in like institutional knowledge. So to me, like that's the biggest value of data, which is like, all right, like as you kind of as these people leave your workforce and like you can't go to them to be like, what happened on this project 10 years ago? And like, why, what was the cost and why is it 2 times more than all the others? I think that's where you see the real value, is like it creates that transparency across the org. So you are not bottlenecked by like individuals who just kind of have the entirety of your firm's knowledge in their head. So
Right.
it kind of makes the data more accessible and shareable um, and not siloed like that.
Right. Yeah, because a single point of knowledge is also a single point of failure,
Yes.
unfortunately,
Yeah.
as we have all experienced, I'm sure, in our lives. All right, we have another anonymous question that has risen to the top. These anonymous questions, by the way, are amazing. So if you feel comfortable adding your name next time and hopping in and asking it live, I really encourage you, because you're all asking amazing stuff. This one is, I was hired to collect and analyze data. When I go around to collect and analyze, I get pushback. How do I help myself in this area? I've experienced this too, whoever you are.
Yeah, I mean,
Any advice?
yes, I like I said, I think, one of the things that I try to push for as much as possible is like, can you get kind of like what I kind of like refer to as latent data collection? So, is there just metadata around other tools that are already generating data that you can use to as a proxy for what you're looking for? Or are there more passive ways to collect data versus like having it be one more thing that people need to fill out and think about and do. So I think that's one respect. The second one is, maybe flip the dynamic of that relationship. Instead of maybe the first time you go to ask somebody something, it's you asking them for something. Figure out, is there anything you could do for them first, and then kind of as a reciprocal thank you, like then you can maybe go with your ask for data. But yeah, I mean, to me, like those have been the biggest pushbacks. It was like when I, with no context, and go to somebody to ask them for something, and it's something like totally out of their normal workflow, that they then have to like set aside time and change frame of references for.
Awesome. Well, let's grab another question from Slido. Our next one in the voting structure is from Jared, and Jared has some asterisks, so I'll ask this for him. Following on from the data sharing question, what variables would be top of your wish list for a standardized cross-industry data set? Like what aggregate data set would have the biggest impact on an industry-wide scale? That's a huge question, so go whichever way you would like with that, or I can reread it for you.
Yeah, no, I was looking at it. So, shoot, that's tough. It's a great question, but it's a very tough one.
It's a big
You know,
one.
like I said, I think one maybe a very easy way to think about it. Like there's really not a standard way by which people, schedule, even within Suffolk, right? Like there's not a standard way that they define tasks, and build a schedule. So, when you want to compare how long did these tasks take on this schedule or this type of project versus other ones, like having I mean, and I will say, like, there are standards out there. It's just that people do not adhere to them. So like I think if there was like more adherence to some of the like kind of just industry wide, like how do you define tasks, what needs to be done, that would propagate kind of all the way through, and then you'd get kind of more standard production rates, like how long does it take to do these tasks. But that is the other thing as well, is that you know there's like two different ways at which time is measured. There's what people kind of what they call construction logs, which are like how long are you on the construction site, and then there's like actual time card data, and those two things very rarely match up. So like understanding like how long it actually takes to do something is very hard to gather with like the tool by which most of the construction industries use to capture that information. So I would say it's probably those two things. Like one is better standardization across like what the tasks are that we're actually doing, and then better tracking of the time it takes to do those things.
All right, awesome. Hopefully, Jared, that answered your question, your big question. I saw Dan Alvey ask a question probably a long time ago. It's small, quick to answer, but I do think it would be helpful. It's for context, how large is Suffolk? How large is your firm?
Oh, sure. Sorry. I thought, yeah, so we're about 3,000 people in total. And again, I would say maybe 25 to 2,600 of those are like people like on site out in construction, like on construction site. And then, the remainder are kind of in corporate functions.
Awesome. All right, cool. That's great context. Thanks for asking, Dan. I have another question here that I saw that was anonymous that I really liked. Where is it? It says, as a construction company, what data sources do you use regarding real estate values and those trends? Is that part of your sort of consideration?
So it's not so much, so it's fine. We actually like, there's Suffolk, there's multiple, uh branches of Suffolk, and there is one that's like real estate investment, and in there they probably are much more focused on that. But I will say, prior to me coming to Suffolk, I did work at CBRE, and they are probably the biggest source of real estate valuations, and I'm pretty sure that we use them here as well. But yeah, like that is not an area that at least my team has been involved in to date. And to be honest, like most of it is not, we're not like we're not the one who are going out procuring locations. So usually it's like an
Right.
owner
Yeah,
has
yeah.
already done it, and like they're just contracting with us to then build.
Yeah, it's such a great question, though. I mean, it's something that I hadn't even thought about, but I've also sort of been on the inside business side of that, where like before we've hired a construction company, we've gone through this whole process of figuring out what site or location we wanted to build or lease or whatever it is. It's a really, really interesting
Yeah.
data problem. All right, I have a question from Rachel that has popped to the top of my slide out. Rachel, would you like to ask?
Oh, it's one of my favorite questions that we like to ask people at the Hangout every week. But is there a piece of memorable career advice maybe that you've received over the course of your career so far, or that you've given others that you'd like to share with us?
That's what I think is probably something that's common when you're kind of early on in your career. You see like whoever managers and like everyone going to meetings, and you're always like, why am I not invited to that meeting? I have like those something, and then you at some point like it flips, and like you start getting invited to meetings, and then you end up showing up at all of them. And like what I always tell my team is like, just because you're invited, like don't, like if you don't not have like an opinion, like if you're gonna go to a meeting, like show up with an opinion and like a purpose. Otherwise, you can just get the notes and summary. So I think you're your time is as valuable as anybody else's time. So just don't think that because someone has sent you something, it's an obligation you have to meet. Like, you can prioritize for yourself and make those decisions and be strategic about, where you allocate your time.
Thank you. I love it.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I
I know
wanted to.
there's a few
Oh, go
minutes
ahead.
left, so I just want to sneak this in here real quickly because Blake had shared a few different examples of the ways that their team is making an impact with data science. And Max Patterson from Suffolk is actually going to be leading our workflow demo next month, so the last Wednesday in March. And so I just wanted to remind everybody that, and I'll share the link in the chat here, but Max will give probably like a 25 to 30-minute demo into one of those use cases. So he's going to talk more about that safety model that Blake mentioned and how they're using Databricks, Posit Team, Cordo, Shiny, Vetiver, everything together to bring that to life. So I'll go put that in the chat right now too.
Yeah,
That's
great. Thank you.
awesome.
Yeah, Max it'll be really good. That's the one, like, it's a very nice evolution of that product from something that was, as I mentioned, like kind of like Frankenstein workflow to start with, to like a much more sleek and business relevant implementation through like the Posit stack that we've stood up.
That's a pretty rare combination that we get to talk to Blake on one day, and then couple of weeks later, we get like a peek behind the curtain in the same company. That's amazing. All right. I wanted to thank everybody for hanging out with us. This was amazing. Blake, thank you so much for sharing all of your thoughts and insights with us. I wanted to also let everybody know that next week we have Jessica Klein, who is a data scientist at the Census Bureau. I just popped a link in the chat if you want to go check out Jessica's profile. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Jessica is amazing and fun to talk to. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll see you next Thursday. Have a wonderful day.